Hello, friends. Welcome to another edition of Truth to Power, your weekly community conversation happy hour, recorded here after work on Friday, June 4th. On Forward Radio, WFMP LP Louisville. We broadcast at 106.5 FM and live stream at forwardradio.org. You can hear all the archived editions of this and our other local programs at forwardradio.org. And we're totally accountable to you, the listeners. We don't have any advertising on our station. We don't have any big foundations that we're accountable to. It's all listener contributions keeping us on the air, so you can help us stay on the air by going to forwardradio.org right now and making a contribution. It's only $20 a day. What a bargain. We also rely entirely on volunteer support, so maybe you want to get behind these microphones and become a guest on a program, or maybe do your own show here on Forward Radio. We'd love to have you, and you can do that too by going to forwardradio.org. My name is Justin Mogg. I'm one of the programmers here at the station. I do a little show called Sustainability Now, and I also have another programmer in the virtual studio with me this week. That's Hart Hagen, host of the Climate Report, which you can hear on this station. It's not every day of the week anymore, is it?
Well, yeah, it is. It is every day at 7
o'clock. Oh, that's right. No, it's a half hour now. Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, sorry.
It's only a half hour.
Only a half hour every day of the week at 7 p.m. You can hear Hart and the Climate Report. And we're really excited to have back on the show with us our good friend, Stephen Bartlett. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you. It's great to be on.
Yeah, Stephen is joining us from the Garden because he is executive director of the Sustainable Ag of Louisville, a proud Forward Radio community partner. And you can learn more about the organization SAL at salouisville.org. Boy, what a great week for just food production in our city, right, guys? Have you been out eating local?
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got some service berries going on, Justin.
Oh, yeah, I do have service berries going on, and I encourage all of our listeners to get their service berry on. If you don't know about them, they're also known as June berries because they're ripe on June 1st. And I just hosted a foraging workshop earlier this afternoon at the University of Louisville. We always get people together at our garden commons for a little stroll around campus to sample all the edible landscaping. And it's not just at the university. You'll find them planted all over town. They're a very common street tree because they're a native species. So you also find them in the woods. But you just have to turn your head here in Louisville, and you should see trees loaded with purple berries. They start out red, but when they're ripe, they're purple. They're the size of a blueberry, a little bit like that in flavor and shape for sure. But it's actually in the almond family. So when you bite down on a service berry, you taste that little bit of nuttiness. And I think it's been a really good year for them. We had that May without any rain, basically, where they, instead of getting really big and watery, they got kind of sweet and concentrated. And then they just got a fresh rinse from 2 days straight of rain, right?
So, Justin, where can you find service berries? You say they're everywhere.
Yeah, literally, like anywhere on the street, under power lines are commonly planted because they don't grow too big. There's some great ones right downtown, just north of Broadway on Jackson. There's like 4 trees that hang over the sidewalk that are great. Just the other day, I was picking off of some trees that are just north of Ali on Floyd Street, next to the University of Louisville's Lion's Eye building. And then there's a whole line of them on 3rd Street down at the main U of L campus, all the way from the main Ekstrom Library south past Eastern Parkway under the railroad overpass on the left there as you're heading south. Man, there's got to be a dozen or so trees that are always just loaded every year. But that's just a few examples. They're literally planted in parking lots and all over town. And the most common question is there another berry that's poisonous that looks like that? I'm like, I don't think so. But you'll put it in your mouth, you'll know immediately whether it's a sweet treat or a poison berry. But it's really funny how unaccustomed we are to foraging, right?
Right. Oh, absolutely. So in addition to eating it fresh, how can you preserve it or prepare it, or how can you cook it? Or not cook it, but
no, you can. I mean, anything you can do with a blueberry, you can do with the service berry. So sure, I eat them fresh this time of year on my cereal, but I also load up my freezer full of them, so I've got them to make stuff with all year long. They're great in smoothies. They're great in ice cream. You could put them in your yogurt, and yeah, you can bake with them. You can make pies, and you could have a great shortcake. Service berry shortcake would be delicious right now. So yeah, like any use you can imagine for any other kind of berry, and they're great mixed with other berries too. So lots of antioxidants, and just a great abundance of nature at this time of year.
So they're in the almond family?
That's right. They are in the almond family, and almonds aren't native to our region, but these things are. So get out this time of year. They're only around for like a couple weeks before they disappear. They'll drop, or the birds will get them. Birds love them. You'll see lots of birds up in the serviceberry trees, but there's plenty for us humans too. One of the three great native fruits everybody should be aware of, right? You guys know the other two?
Pawpaws.
Pawpaws, yeah, that's right.
And blackberries.
Well, blackberries, I don't know. Are blackberries native?
Oh, yeah.
I'm never sure about
they grow wild.
Are they? Great. I was thinking trees.
Okay.
There's another
mulberries. Yeah, mulberry. There's some native mulberries and there's some non-native mulberries.
I'm glad you mentioned that. Yeah, it's also mulberry season, so don't miss this opportunity to grab yourself some mulberries. There's all kinds of different varieties you'll find in town, and they must crossbreed or something too, because you'll see trees that have all kinds of different colors and shapes on them. I find the ones that are white mulberries tend to be like the sweetest, most amazing, or like candy. But there's great purple ones too, and yeah, you can make jams just like with service berries. You jams and jellies out of them. No, I was thinking of the other native fruit that's ready in the fall, in late fall, which is a persimmon. And they're not at all like those Asian persimmons you find in the supermarket. They're sweet and I don't know, they're a different texture, but they're delicious. I love I love a persimmon.
Of course.
Yeah, so I encourage everybody to get out and forage this time of year. That's what I've been up to. How about you guys?
Well, yeah, well, my wife found a neighbor's cherry tree overhanging the road.
Nice.
And yeah, I mean, the next stage would be to bring a ladder, but I think I'd like to talk to the owner. I don't think the owner knows he or she has all this delicious sweet cherries going in her front right away. But yeah, you'd be amazed if you look around how much food you can find this time of year.
Yeah, and cherries too are one that I think have benefited this year from those droughty conditions we had, because I often find our cherries just get attacked by fungus and you lose them, most of them. But this year they seem to be doing great.
Yeah, my brother has a mess of them, and they're so sweet. I mean, but then last week was the big delicacy of the Fresh Stop Strawberry Festival, and it was a pickup drive-through. But man, you've never had such a delicious slice. A gallon of those strawberries just melted in your mouth. It was amazing.
Yes, it's strawberry season too. That's a great thing. Not a native thing, but a great one to have in your garden. And also very productive this year.
They supplied first aid at our planting of the Three Sisters, because one of our compañeras got very overheated in the heat of the midday planting our crop, but there were strawberries right on the edge there, and she rehydrated munching on Adam Barr's strawberries, which are fantastic also.
Yeah, you want to say more about the Three Sisters plot out in Meade County?
Well, we planted like 3 days before the full moon, and had some wonderful volunteers come out, including AJ, one of our veteran camp counselors, and her husband and baby, Lavender. Anyway, they came out, and it was just a wonderful gathering of some of the old timers with some new folks, and then we had a wonderful meal afterwards, including some really amazing mulberries from the front yard of Adam Bar as well.
Yeah, this is something we've been doing. You taught me some history this year about it. We've been doing this since 2001.
The corn. The corn has been grown and saved since then. Yeah,
and it's a classic indigenous strategy to plant corn, beans, and squash, the three sister crops all together, because they really complement one another. And the neat thing is you can plant them as seed in the ground at the same moment, and they'll all serve each other in different ways. So the beans sort of fertilize, they fix nitrogen, fertilize the soil a little bit for the corn, which acts as sort of the infrastructure by growing up tall and straight, and the beans can grow up the corn. And then the squashes like to spread out over the soil and cover it and keep the weeds down. So it turns out to be a pretty good lazy man's crop in a sense. Like we just
that makes too much sense. It's supposed to take time, effort, and lots of money spent on fertilizers. That's how you're supposed to grow things.
That's right. That's right. No, we just put the seeds in the ground, come back once to do a weeding about a month later, and then come back at harvest time. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And I was just occurred to me, many people have forgotten about this method of growing these three crops together, but it goes back millennia. And I feel like we're doing a family reunion. When we gather, we gather our family of two-leggeds along with our family of climbing and rooting annual crops. So it's a wonderful doing it together. Yeah.
So the beans want to grow on something, and the corn provides a structure for the beans to grow on. And also the beans fix nitrogen, so they, that provides your nitrogen fertilizer. It's like the atmosphere is 78% nitrogen.
Right.
So why would you want to buy nitrogen when you've got 78% of the atmosphere? That nitrogen is just dying to, be useful in the soil. If you have like legumes, but also a lot of bacteria fix nitrogen. So if we just plant the right things and plant the right mixes of things, then we can get this nitrogen out of the atmosphere. And it's like farmer Gabe Brown said. He said, I like to sign the back of a check, not the front of a check. He said, you don't want to, he said, I got tired of writing checks, writing checks for nitrogen fertilizer. When you got all this nitrogen right there in the atmosphere, you just have to have a good strategy for what you plant.
Yeah. Yeah, isn't that true? And we wouldn't have this abundance of chemical fertilizers if it wasn't for the abundance of fossil fuels, right? I mean, that's
right.
Really the only reason that we see all this chemical fertilizer. And then it ties into a whole fossil fuel based industrial agricultural system with giant tractors and equipment that none of it we would ever even think to have if we weren't like sloshing around with all these preserved sunlight from eons ago, and that solar energy that hit the swamps back in the time of the dinosaurs, right? That
right.
we're digging out of the ground or pumping out of the ground and using, burning, and would be great if it was just a little treat that we could use and not worry about. But unfortunately, it is leading to climate disaster. And maybe we'll have some time to talk about climate change later in the show. But I really do want to get to some of these issues that Stephen wanted to talk about with us today. I think it's been really top of people's minds as we here in places like Louisville start to feel like we can finally breathe again after COVID, when we've finally gotten to a place where enough of us are vaccinated. But when you look globally, the situation is not nearly so positive. And in fact, there's many, we've heard about India recently, but South America is also facing a real crisis in terms of the pandemic ongoing. And I think a lot of the responsibility for that lies on us here in the wealthy countries, right, Stephen?
Well, I mean, okay, what we have is not a. We've gotten the habit of not working together with other countries, under Trump, and so now we're faced with this issue of basically a lot of people not even wanting to get the vaccines who haven't had it yet, whereas places like Africa is only 1% vaccinated in Africa. Yeah. Okay, and then we're getting new outbreaks in different parts of Africa. Latin America has been hammered. I mean, we've had some terrible outbreaks, and of course, Brazil is like third in the world for COVID cases and deaths, and so we have a major crisis. I mean, we may be feeling a little bit better. I feel wonderful about being vaccinated and having things open up again, but I'm thinking about going back to the Dominican Republic, for example, and where they don't have enough vaccines to really make a dent in the population in terms of stopping the the general, outbreaks of COVID. So, and India is just a horrible, horrible situation that has been called by some, a crime against humanity, how Modi handled that,
Yeah.
the whole crisis there. Brazil, I mean, you got the Trump of the Southern Cone, right? Bolsonaro, who just denied it, got it himself like Trump, and then, but doesn't want to deal with it,
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's quite. So we're very privileged. So I heard today, Biden says we're gonna send 80 million doses, and that's better than the 20 million talked about last week. But we need to really get like Jeffrey Sachs was saying on Democracy Now! Today. We need a Zoom call with all the big players, the pharmaceuticals, the government, and the health officials from the WHO around the world, and COVAX and everything, to make a plan, because governments don't know when they're going to get the vaccines. They can't plan for rolling out vaccination campaigns. Right now, it's the beneficence of China and Russia and some other side deals that people are making to get some vaccines. But we don't want it to be like this casino market where people are extorting high prices of vaccines. And it's a life and death situation. This should be a coordinated international effort. There should be subsidies. The big government should put up some money, because it's in everyone's benefit to get the whole population of the world vaccinated. There's no reason. I think someone said with 50 billion, you could have everyone vaccinated within 12 months.
Wow.
Right? When you think about how much we've spent just on the stimulus in the United States, and yet 50 billion across the whole world would end the pandemic. The priority.
Stephen, don't you know we need to spend that on bombs?
Yeah, right. Those F-35s don't come cheap, Stephen.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, $1 trillion program. Plane doesn't work. Well, one thing that happens here is the pharmaceutical companies, and Bill Gates is no small part of this. Bill Gates has made his fortune, patenting things, and pharmaceutical companies patent things, and Gates has, invests in the pharmaceutical companies either directly or through the Gates Foundation, but they're patenting things that have been developed at taxpayer expense. So all this research, at least 75% of this research is developed at taxpayer expense, and then it gets handed over to one pharmaceutical company who then has a monopoly. Patent in the form of a monopoly in the form of a patent, and then they get to charge whatever prices they want. And you have multiple companies doing this, but it's a big racket, because private profit, it's like privatizing the profits and socializing the costs of this stuff. So.
Well, and there's been a hoarding issue too. Like it's not just corporate greed, but I guess nationalistic greed, right? And we always like to point to what the U.S. is doing wrong, but Canada, right, has hoarded an incredible amount of the vaccine. Like there's this overreaction, very similar to what we saw at the start of the pandemic when people were hoarding things like toilet paper for some reason I still can't.
Right.
I don't know why anyone thought they were going to need extra toilet paper if they caught COVID, but
first things first.
First things first, right? But we've been hoarding these vaccines too, and when you think selfishly instead of collectively and cooperatively, that's the kind of behavior you get, whether it's down at your local Kroger or globally with a vaccine, right? And it's such a shame that we tend to think that way, but it's not surprising given this is directly tied into what Hart was just saying about spending on the military, right? Like you wouldn't spend all that money on defense, so-called, although it's really used for offense, but you wouldn't spend all that money if you were thinking about collective liberation and collective well-being globally, and we wouldn't hoard vaccines if we didn't do that either. And Stephen was talking about the need for global coordination here, and we have it, right? That's why we have a United Nations and a World Health Organization, is just for exactly these kinds of events. And people will say, oh, look how they failed in this time of crisis. But I think they were pushed off the cliff by people like Trump and Bolsonaro and everybody else, right? Like it was this perfect storm of a virus plus neo-fascism in my mind that really put us in such dire straits. Am I off base on that?
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. And the other aspect is that we've already dismantled sort of the equal access to the healthcare system here in the United States. So that's why we have such tremendous disparities and disproportionality in who's suffering the most from the COVID. But it's also the reason why patents are held, like intellectual property is held as something that is held as more important than health of humanity.
Yeah.
Right? At this point, the big pharmaceuticals don't want to share the recipes for their vaccines, which and therefore, like places like India that have the capacity to produce large amounts of vaccines, if given the recipe and some a little bit of technological help with some of the manufacturing capacity there, and also Brazil is a big. Mexico also can produce vaccines, right? Why are we hoarding the recipes when these should be out there being produced in many manufacturing facilities across the world? And that's really the way that we're going to put a dent in the problem of the global South not having access to the vaccines.
So one way that we could do this is not have patents. It's like if something is developed at government expense, anybody can use it, and we're not gonna. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is to have at least 3 companies that each have a patent. There would at least be some competition there. So yeah, I'm just almost categorically against patents. I mean, I just think it's it's enclosure of the commons. It's taking public assets, many of them developed at public expense, and it's putting it into the hands of a very few. We're taught that patents are supposed to incentivize investment. No, they don't. They incentivize hoarding. And so just saying.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a way to patent. They're talking about even if that's licensing, providing licenses, which they don't want to do. What we want to avoid is monopoly control of the most important things in our life, right? And so that is where we need better regulation. We need more. I can see some use for having patents, but well regulated and limited in time and limited in scope. And if there is public money, that should be open, like you say, a common good.
Well, most of the stuff, like it's my understanding that the mRNA technology that is being used for the vaccines was developed at public expense.
Yes, correct. Yep.
So there's medical technology, and most technology is developed under the Pentagon and DARPA and all that. And so every component of an iPhone, for example, was developed by the Defense Department at public expense, and then it gets handed over, to companies that are in a position to make money off of it. But they, here's my iPhone. I have to pay for my iPhone. They should be paying me for this iPhone because, there's so much market activity going on as a result of the iPhone. They should be paying us because we invested in it to begin with. If we had real capitalism, then the taxpayer that invested for decades in the iPhone or all this medical technology would be being paid back. Since it's not easy to pay back the taxpayer directly, one way they could pay us back is just making this intellectual property open source and freely available to anybody who can use it, instead of giving the most profitable corporations in the world exclusive right to use what was developed because of your taxes and mine, our parents' taxes, our grandparents' taxes, our great-grandparents' taxes. Heck, if you just go back to 1945, you're going back several generations of taxpayers who are paying to the government for this, technology to be developed. Don't get me started on technology,
Well, and it's especially egregious now that there's a whole field called biotech, and biotechnology allows now corporations to have monopoly patents on seeds. Things like seeds,
right,
and then an individual farmer who might the unfortunate in a situation of having to plant those seeds to make a living can be sued
All right.
by these corporations for saving the seed.
Yeah.
A traditional farming practice that helps reduce costs and allows farmers to have some control over what they're growing. They're just trying to impose this monopolistic model of agribusiness and it's global too, right, Stephen? These issues aren't just confined to American farmers, right?
Well, that's why they call them transnational corporations, right?
Yeah.
Because they have no allegiance to any government. They are supra-governmental. So that's why our movements need to be transnational solidarity, internationalist movements.
Right. Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed that out, and always advocate for that and remind
That's
us.
communism. I can't do that. That's communism.
So Hart's solution is no patents. How do you propose research gets funded then? Are you just saying we should tax corporations more and fund research publicly? Is that what you're saying?
Well, what are we going to, what do we want to do anyway? I mean, the situation we have now, if you're going to make drugs for erectile dysfunction or male pattern baldness, then that gets funding because you can make money back on that. Ralph Nader talks about how, in the 60s, I think in Vietnam, they wanted to come up with anti-malarial drugs. So it's like, what company is going to want to come up with an anti-malarial drug? Can't make a profit off of that. So they just had like 4 different government-funded, government executed and implemented projects where they came up with, out of the 4 programs, they came up with 3 different anti-malarial drugs that are still being used today. And it's like, where did we get the idea that government is incapable of doing this kind of thing? And, so the funding comes from the taxpayer anyway. That part doesn't have to change. The only part that has to change is that we're not going to give Wall Street exclusive patents on what we paid to develop.
100% agreed, 100%.
Yeah. We're talking here today on our Truth to Power Happy Hour here on Forward Radio. My name is Justin Mogg. I'm a programmer here at the station. I do a show called Sustainability Now. Another programmer is Hart Hagen with us today. He does the Climate Report every day of the week at 7 p.m. And we're really thrilled to have joining us in the virtual studio today our good friend Stephen Bartlett from Sustainable Agriculture of Louisville. You can learn more about them at salouisville.org. They're a proud community partner of us here at Forward Radio. We're talking about vaccine apartheid today and other issues that are in the news. The Biden administration has done some surprisingly progressive things, but seems to be pretty hesitant to restore taxes on corporations and the 1%, right, Stephen?
It feels like Biden administration is feeling like they're being ground down by the never-ending grumbling of Republicans and their crazy agenda that they have to block any progressive legislation. So yeah, the issue of taxes, right? Everyone's the right wing is, the problem is the media doesn't really hold people, spokespersons for these different points of view to account. So the Republicans are saying we don't want any increase of corporate taxes, but we remember last year when suddenly the tax rate went from like 28% down to 19%, something like that, or 16%, some ridiculous thing. It was like the 1% made out like bandits from those tax cuts that were passed by the last Congress. So all we're asking for is to reverse those so we can pay for very badly needed infrastructure and support for daycare, and to get our economy back going again. There's a lot of, the war, okay, cutting taxes for $2 trillion, but they don't want to pay for any stimulus, we have a $21 trillion debt. So what is another $2 trillion going to do? Really, we're already sort of indebted to our future. The next generation is going to have to pay off our debt. But right now, people are suffering. They're getting evicted. We have still millions who are unemployed. who were previously employed before COVID. But we still need help. I mean, the bottom tier of society needs big time help, and I just think it's ridiculous that they don't know how to fight. They want to sound reasonable. They want to be bipartisan. They don't want to do away with the filibuster, which we now learn is a relic of slavery. Basically, the desire to prevent progressive policies from taking place in the South. The filibuster was used mostly by white supremacists for practically a century, to keep
Right.
Jim Crow in place. So, I mean, I think we need a more fight. And why are we not here and fight? Because the Democrats are too beholden to very big campaign donors, and that's the bottom line. It's just like moving. It's trying to herd cats. Really, they're cool cats. They don't want to be taxed. It's hard to herd them, And they have the ear of the politicians.
Well, a couple of issues come to mind. One is what's the vision, and the other is, what to the extent that we need funding, where's that funding going to come from? In terms of the income tax, tax rate counts for something, but also the tax breaks count for a lot. We give a lot of money, tax credits to corporations for doing things like, I don't know, jobs, and well, we could pay people directly for jobs, and if it's research and development, we could do research and development directly. I don't think when you get up, I favor a wealth tax. The income tax obviously is a source of revenue, but income tax, if you count the Social Security tax, it's kind of regressive. You're taxing wage earners, and instead of taxing people in the upper brackets. It's been shown that if you invest $1 in IRS to actually do its job, then it can come up with $7 if they pursue the right people. But I question whether the income tax will ever be, if you get up to billionaires, their actual income is just a minuscule portion of their wealth. So I like Bernie Sanders' wealth tax, which if you're up to 32 million, you're not taxed at all, and then it starts at 1%, and then it goes up to 8% when you get up into the billionaire category. And so 8% per year is nothing. It's reasonable. I mean, billionaires can get 8% return on their money. Plus, so if we wanted to get serious about, taxing in a way that's reasonably fair and reasonably simple, I think we need a wealth tax. So.
Yeah, and I don't think there's any other way to really get at the current wealth inequality. I mean, without completely turning over our economic system. As long as we're going to have a capitalist system, if we want any kind of equity, it's going to require some good tax policy. Some progressive tax policy, right?
Right. Yeah, and concentration of wealth is inherently anti-democratic.
Yeah.
I mean, if you have enough money, you can buy the government.
Right.
Too much money and too much power in too few hands is the power to make war. It's the power to put out toxic products with no accountability. It's the power to bust unions. You could just go on and on and on. Too much power in too few hands is against the interests of the people. And as long as power is money, and as long as we allow that power and money to continue to accumulate, we can expect that we have less and less power as individuals.
What do you guys think about?
I'm here to cheer you up.
Yeah. About a sort of a wealth cap. I feel like it doesn't really make any sense that people can sort of infinitely accumulate wealth. What really? Why would? How is it going to improve your life or anybody else's beyond a certain amount? Right after your first few million.
Well, what you need to understand, Justin, is that if Jeff Bezos has $200 billion, then he works 200 billion times harder than you.
Yeah, he's that much smarter than all of us, of course.
Right. He's contributed. He has that much money because he's a contributor.
Yeah. Well, I think there's got to be a smarter way forward for us. But I want to also get to another global issue that Stephen's been keen to talk about, which is the UN Food Systems Summit, which our listeners might not be aware of, happening this summer, right? And captured by Big Ag. Is that what's what is the
Well,
situation?
I'm glad you find that amusing, Hart. But this is the Committee on Food Security of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN has been opening up a process of dialogue with a civil society mechanism. It's been a big fight among social movements and grassroots organizations around the world to get a place at the table to be able to talk about food policy and the right to food. The U.S. representatives, by the way, are just 100% against the concept of the right to food. Okay, and they're against collective human rights in general. Right? They only believe in a very limited individual rights, which basically takes the teeth out of the whole concept of human rights. So, what we're seeing is suddenly out of nowhere, this food systems summit was going to happen in September, and they brought in the corporate bigwigs, these big corporate players, to organize it and to invite people. And well, they got a black eye because civil society just said, that's outrageous. We're going to boycott. We're not going to take part.
Wow.
This is illegitimate.
Yes.
This is illegitimate, And so the Via Campesina, so the U.S. Food Sovereignty Alliance, so Climate Justice Alliance, Indigenous Peoples Treaty, a lot of groups are just totally 100% against what's happening with this summit. So we're having a series of events about the UN processes, about UN governance, and about the corporate capture. Basically, the UN has been taken over by nation states have been taken over by corporate interests who then translate their desires and their policies into the nations presenting these ideas in the UN and the UN processes. And basically, one of our members, Tyler Short, has been on very late webinars and conference calls to hash out language about what is agroecology, what is the concept of agroecology, why is it essential to be part of the food system debate. But you're finding that the U.S., without fail, the U.S. and a couple of European countries and a couple of countries that want to curry favor with the U.S., end up opposing what basically the majority of humanity is calling for in the language of these kinds of documents and in the agenda of the Committee for Food Security at the UN.
I have a couple of questions. Steve. One is, what is food sovereignty, and why is it a good thing? And also, how do corporations, big food corporations like Monsanto and ConAgra and Archer Daniels Midland, how do they get in the way of people's food sovereignty?
Well, basically, food sovereignty, a lot of us define it as decentralized and participatory food democracy. Okay, it means societies, communities should have the right to decide what's the appropriate food to eat, how should it be produced, how should it be processed, or how should it be made available to everyone. That's food sovereignty. It's basically a concept that's so wonky that the corporations haven't been able to co-opt it. So, and since it's a word that's hard to spell, it makes people have to spend time to understand what it means. It basically means food democracy in a radical sense. The corporations, they direct how policy happens. They direct, because they are big buyers, they tend to crush the smaller, right? The big crush the smaller. The big fish eat the little fish.
Right.
You can't compete.
Right.
That's the overall dynamic. However, people are the majority. If we really seek and make happen real democracy in the grassroots spaces, we're going to end up with the food that we want to eat, produced by ourselves and processed and distributed in a way that we find appropriate, fair, and beneficial and healthy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now, Louisville is faced. Right now, there's $150 million coming to Louisville, the American Rescue Package money. And last night we had a very good first meeting of food justice advocates and participants, producers and eaters and people fighting for Economic and Social Justice came together last night. We're going to try to get the ear of Metro Council and say, look, we need a good food system. We need some new policies and some new money to help make food justice happen in our city here. Make urban ag possible, make it easier for people to produce their own food and to process it. Make it easier for people to get vacant land to produce food on. Make it easier and support, a higher price for local food that can be subsidized in procurement in the city. To make it possible for people with low income to receive the same kind of healthy food that people from affluent neighborhoods do when they buy organic produce at local, farmers markets. So there's a whole series of great recommendations that came out of the meeting, and we're going to be pushing this agenda forward. I see it as a microcosm of the big fight at the UN over the Food Systems Summit.
It would be great for so many reasons for us to be able to have the economics to get more of our food locally. Certainly, less carbon usage when we are able to have less transport, and when we have our food that's not grown by nitrogen fertilizers that take lots of natural gas, like 10 calories of natural gas to produce 1 calorie of food. Plus the nutrition of local food is so much better. And the nutrition of food that's produced on regenerative farms where they have healthy soils is all very good, but our food system is designed for profit for the big players. So if you design your food for shelf life with lots of packaging and processing and preservatives, then that's profitable, but it's not healthy. So we need, so Stephen, how exactly would it be subsidized? I know that they're like SNAP program and things like that are one way of subsidizing local food by making, local farmers markets eligible for SNAP benefits and that kind of thing. But
yes,
what else?
Yeah, I can picture the mechanism of double dollar type system that the county or the combined county and city put some money behind, and therefore when people who are eligible for SNAP or WIC go to a farmer's market or go to a local grocery, which we hope that there will also be money to help young people start local businesses, small scale neighborhood grocery stores, or points of distribution of food that can be some other model that's not within the capitalistic profit motive. Cooperative type food distribution, like is being done with Fresh Stops under the New Roots program of Fresh Stops.
Right.
So we want money to back up successful models of community organizing that have brought healthy food to low-income neighborhoods, and we want real money. Look at this, $150 million. Imagine how far, let's say, $20 or $30 million could go in terms of giving a huge stimulus for local production of food, local production, processing, and distribution of food, right? You could have job creation all around for people to process and distribute food throughout all the corners of Louisville. It could all be local food, right? This could be accelerate awakening that's happening around healthy food and localized food economies.
I couldn't agree more. My journey through climate analysis leads me to that there's no single higher priority than regenerative farming. So,
and what do you mean when you say that, Hart?
Well, one thing I was going to say is that regenerative farming could be a basis for a local economy, but I'm not sure exactly what you wanted me to address. But
I was saying what regenerative agriculture is.
Well, okay, so it's generally where you say no to some things so you can say yes to other things. You
Right.
say no to chemical fertilizers. You say no to chemical pesticides. You say no to tilling for the most part. And what you end up with is you say no to monocultures. which is one crop as far as the eye can see. You say yes to more biodiversity on the local farm. You say yes to living soils, because the tilling and the chemicals and the pesticides tend to kill the soils, and it's the living soils that deliver nutrition to the food. It's living soils that can soak up water when it rains. It's living soils that can soak up carbon year after year after year. So whether you're a gardener or a farmer, your land becomes more and more valuable because it becomes more and more carbon rich. And so that's what regenerative farming is. It's good for nutrition. It's good for carbon. I think it would be tremendous for local economies.
And I like to think of it as the opposite of extractive industries. So, so much of our economy is based on these things, whether it's as straightforward as a mine extracting resources from the ground, or extracting wealth from people's labor, like this country was founded on, right? The extractive industry of chattel slavery. But modern agriculture has become that way. Industrialized agriculture tends to be very extractive, relying on limited amount of topsoil and not caring about preserving it, right? And the nutrients embedded in it, or tapping into the Ogallala Aquifer in Nebraska, right? And basically mining fossil water that won't be replenished faster than you're using it. And so these kinds of practices are extractive, and it ties back to the extractive nature of patented seeds, right? But a regenerative system is one where you're building wealth, you're putting back into the land, right? And you're making sure that your system can truly be sustainable by providing its own fertility, by its own moisture, everything that plants need. Well, or you can do it with animals too, right? Animal regenerative agriculture too. It's just a different way of thinking about doing farming and doing business. And you're absolutely right that it can be a source of wealth for us, and a way to base an economy on a more sustainable model, right?
Right, exactly. So I like to think. I like to think of a farm. A farm or a garden can be part of the ecosystem. It's like if nothing's eating your plants, then you're not part of the ecosystem. The way our farms are today, they crowd out nature. A monoculture is low diversity, but nature is high diversity. So when some of nature's diversity comes into your monoculture, you got to kill it. So but we could have farms that actually regenerate. We can have farms that have an absence of toxins. They tend to build the soils. They tend to need pollinators, so that you have wildflowers for the pollinators. You have a diversity of crops, which is good for nutrition. The diversity is also good for, there's nothing better than plant diversity to build your soil health.
Right.
And so.
Stephen, did you want to jump in?
Oh, just that my phone's about to die, but I wish you all harmony and prosperity, and la lucha sigue, as the Zapatistas used to say, and I continue to say la lucha sigue. So this is a spring of great promise, and I hope that the energy from Black Lives Matter and from the great social movements that have been rising up and taking the streets, I feel like we need to continue that, and I feel like we have some momentum, and I feel like people are waking up gradually, and it's heartening.
Yeah.
So thank you. I think my phone is about to die, so I didn't want to just slip away into.
Oh, that's well. Thanks for letting us know, and thanks for joining us and taking the time. Maybe if I could quickly ask before your phone dies, did I hear children in the background? Are the garden camps happening this year?
No, unfortunately, the church couldn't open the facility in time, and but the church did put in a beautiful little play area next to the church, and families come, and that's what they heard. Actually, I was watching a little boy who wanted to harvest one of the still green apples in the Granny Smith apple tree that we have, and but he wasn't tall enough to grab it, so I was trying to tell him no. You got to wait for that apple to mature first.
Yeah, a lesson in patience. Well, great. Well, thanks for joining us, Stephen. It's great to have you here on Truth to Power, and we welcome you back anytime, my friend. Enjoy the garden.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you so
Steve.
much.
Well, as we conclude our program here, Hart, I know you really did want to. You had some important reflections on climate change, and you've kind of set up this framework of Plan A versus B versus C. You want to tell me about that?
So let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Plan A is so the purpose of this is to show how we have a Republican plan and just in broad terms, generalizing, we have a Republican plan and a Democratic plan, and
Wait,
then
Republicans have a plan for climate change? I thought they like to put their head in the sand.
that's kind of the point. Yeah, that's kind of the point. No plan. Also, the Republican plan is Plan A. So, lots and lots of fossil fuels. You're in denial about climate change. You're in denial about biodiversity loss. You're in denial about environmental pollution. So there's no plan whatsoever to address any of these issues. Plus, we're thoroughgoing capitalists. Capitalism equals freedom. It's not perfect, but it's the best we have, right? And then as a result of all this, there are no limits on fossil fuels, no limits on war. War is all good all the time. And no limits on cars, no limits on air travel, no limits on big ag or urban sprawl or consumption. So that's the Republican plan. We know that that's nowheresville. We know that that's and Republicans are coming around. They see profit opportunities in like selling things like solar panels and any technology that can be. Anyway, I'm halfway tongue in cheek there, but if there's profit to be made, then they're going to be on board with that.
Of course, there's no limits on those things. Hard limits un-American.
I know it's un-American. It's like, what's wrong with this? Is the Wild West. There's unlimited sky and unlimited land.
This country was founded on no limits.
What?
This country was founded on no limits.
Right. So you just have to ignore the people that were here before we got here.
Oh yes.
Yeah, you just have to deny that they ever existed. So Plan B is the Democratic plan. It's lots and lots of clean and renewable energy. So we're going to invest in solar power and wind power and electric vehicles and batteries and a smart grid. And we're going to generate lots and lots of clean and renewable energy. And it's going to be, but the problem there is that you're flooding the market with cheap energy. So that's a problem. Plus, solar panels have they have a carbon footprint of their own. But anyway, continuing with the Plan B, we're going to hope that clean and renewable energy will reduce carbon. We're going to hope. And a lot of it is just throwing a lot of mud up against the wall. It's tactics without strategies. We hope this works, and there's no real plan or strategy. Lots and lots of techno fixes. It is capitalist because the Democratic plan wants to engage Wall Street. They want to engage Michael Bloomberg and Richard Branson and the Rockefeller brothers and the Ford Foundation. But also in this plan, there's no meaningful reform of agriculture. There's no meaningful reform of transportation or defense. Those are three things that need to be revolutionized, if not go away entirely.
Yeah.
Defense needs to go away by 90% at least.
Yeah.
Transportation, no, we're not serious about climate if we're churning out 65 million new cars per year worldwide.
Right.
We could stop manufacturing cars tomorrow and we still have enough to last us from here on out, baby. But
we're going to make more cars, because they have to be electric now.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you have to make more cars, and they're going to have lots and lots of gadgets and lots of features. So electric cars are like, what?
Have you ever once heard of someone talking about retrofitting an existing car, existing gas-powered car, and making it electric? Nobody talks about that.
Right.
We've got all these cars everywhere, and the whole thinking is, we'll just junk them, I guess, and make new ones, right? Like, that is such unsustainable thinking.
Think about cars is that I heard from a pretty reliable source that 60% of the pollution occurs before they roll off the assembly line.
That's right.
There's
It's
so much of
already
the
in there.
pollution occurs in the manufacturing process.
Yep.
So it's like, I have friends with brand new electric cars, and I have friends with like a 16-year-old Prius,
Yeah.
or even a 16-year-old, or even a 20-year-old Nissan, something from the 90s or early.
Right.
That second group, in my mind, they're a lot more sustainable. I mean,
Absolutely.
so
But
anyway,
they won't go around feeling high and mighty about it. So they're not going to talk about it. The people who's taking up all the oxygen in the room are the people who want to, shake the fancy new car in your face, right?
yeah, and that's what we hear. That's virtue signaling, right?
Yeah,
So we hear about that because groups like Inside Climate News is like, on board with the corporate agenda, or any commercial. Like there's a GM had a Super Bowl ad that talked about how they're going to be doing electric cars. It's just, it's corporate products. We're going to shop our way out of this crisis.
right.
So so there's that. How much time do we have, Justin?
We've only got 5 minutes. I think we should
Okay.
get to Plan C.
Okay, yeah. So, but plan B, a little real quick. Yeah, we're inattention to ecology, and so like we need to do less physics and more biology. We need to do. We've used physics to conquer and subdue and
Like that.
exploit and abuse the planet. We need more biology so we can understand. We're trying to get to the stars, and we don't even understand how the soil beneath our feet works. We don't know. We don't know 1% of what we should know about our soil. Even anybody, anywhere. There's so much to be explored. There's like millions of species of fungi, millions of species of biota. So anyway, so
Same thing
plans.
about the oceans, Hart. We know
What? Yeah.
the ocean.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Right. And like the military could have a good job just like set and enforce reasonable fishing laws instead of bombing other countries. We have the satellites for that. We probably have the Navy ships and the planes just to enforce reasonable laws anyway. So that's what I know about the ocean. But Plan C is the direct approach. If we're going to reduce fossil fuels, there's this thing called actually reducing fossil fuels. In Hart Hagen's fantasy world, I look around me, and half the economy is a complete waste.
Yep.
When you talk, I've done this analysis in some detail, but if you look around you, things like defense, most of the manufacturing we have is a complete waste. And it's because it's all for profit. It's not for the well-being of people or the planet. So get rid of half of the economy, and you're not going to get rid of things that anybody care about. That half of the economy we can get rid of only serves to concentrate power and wealth into the hands of a very few, instead of being stuff that we need. It's like, I'll give you back half your time and half your money, but we need to get control of our economy. The economy needs to be democratic. Democracy is where you get to vote on what affects you. So continuing with Plan C, do you really want to solve the climate crisis, or do you want to play footsie with Republicans? It's like, the Biden climate plan, just playing footsie with Republicans. Let's wink and let's subsidize all this stuff. We need to, any climate plan that's going to work, you need a strong social justice component.
Yes.
You need for people to be involved. You need, it's like, what's in it for me? The 99% have every right to say what's in it for me, because before now, the whole thing has been geared toward what's in it for the 1%. So we need to offer things that make a difference in people's lives. If that's a universal basic income, we need to do that. Certainly Medicare for all only exists for the insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and the politicians that support them. Jobs guarantee is a beautiful idea. There's a wonderful little book on that by Pavlina Cherneva. And jobs guarantee is a whole other topic, but it's like a jobs guarantee would involve staffing understaffed nonprofits and government entities on public interest things.
Yep.
Like, let's put people to work in the public interest, give them a living wage, give them benefits, working for the public interest. And that would take that would shift power from the private sector. It's like, what are we going to, as it is, we're subsidizing McDonald's in 100 different ways. Home Depot, all the big companies, we're subsidizing exploitation. Let's stop that. So in summary, we need an economy based on care. We need to care, we need to care for people, we need to care for nature, and we need to care for our vital systems, and stop having an economy that's just based on, the freedom to exploit.
Yeah, or extract. Yeah,
Extract, right.
We need that regenerative economy if we're really going to have justice, and if we're really going to have sustainability. And you're absolutely right, Hart, that there has to be a way forward that is built on an economy of care. I think that's a great note to end our conversation on this week. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me here, Hart, and thank you all listeners for tuning in to us here at Forward Radio. We will be back in your ears again in 1 week's time with another community conversation like you won't hear anywhere else, only here at 106.5 FM and forwardradio.org. So see you all soon.
Support nonprofit radio. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.